When you think of the Roman Empire, you imagine gleaming silver armor, perfect battle formations, and glorious conquests. You imagine the Roman legionary as an untouchable killing machine, a master of war, but history has lied to you. The deadliest enemy a Roman soldier faced wasn't a barbarian horde. It didn't strike amidst the chaos of combat. In fact, the absolute deadliest enemy they faced was waiting for them every single morning, right in the palm of their hands. How could a tiny, everyday object wipe out entire legions? Behind the shining armor and the brilliant engineering lay a horrifying biological nightmare. When 50,000 exhausted, dirt-caked men are crammed into a tightly packed military encampment, human waste becomes a weapon of mass destruction. To survive, Roman engineers built massive, subterranean communal latrines. It was considered the pinnacle of ancient technology. But deep inside that system lies a terrifying secret. Imagine descending into a dark, damp stone tunnel. No doors, no privacy walls. Lining the walls are long, cold marble benches, carved with dozens of circular keyhole-shaped openings. 20, 30, sometimes 40 massive, battle-hardened men sit shoulder to shoulder in the dark, their bare knees touching. Beneath them, a continuous stream of murky underground water carries everything away. It sounds somewhat clean until it was time to clean yourself. Toilet paper did not exist. Instead, running right at their feet was a shallow stone trench, filled with cloudy, stinging salt water or harsh vinegar. And resting in that murky trench was the xylospongium, the sponge on a stick that was exactly what it sounds like, a rough sea sponge tightly tied to a wooden handle. You reached down into the dark water. You pulled up the dripping sponge, and then the absolute horror of the Roman system. You put it back down, so the stranger sitting right next to you could use it next. If that communal sponge wasn't washed properly in the vinegar, it became a biological time bomb. Dysentery, cholera, and intestinal parasites spread through the tight ranks of the legion like a silent wildfire. These invisible killers could turn massive, muscular warriors into hollow, dehydrated ghosts in a matter of days. In reality, disease and microscopic infection killed far more Roman soldiers than enemy blades ever did. And if the bacteria didn't kill you, the latrine itself might. Without modern ventilation, thick clouds of highly flammable methane gas silently build up deep within the unlit sewer channels. Point one stray spark from a careless wall torch, and the abyss would erupt. Pillars of flame would violently shoot up through the stone holes, severely burning anyone unfortunate enough to be sitting above. Yes, Roman latrines were known to literally explode. Ironically, the savage barbarians of the north had a much safer system. The Germanic tribes simply dug a hole in the dense forest, used natural moss to clean themselves, and buried it. Nature did the rest, isolating the bacteria perfectly, but the Romans were too proud. Blinded by the brilliance of their own plumbing, they gathered all their waste into one centralized location, engineering a massive, communal epicenter of death. Oh, why didn't the soldiers just sneak out into the woods? Because in the Roman legion, breaking protocol was a death sentence that if you abandoned your post or broke camp sanitation rules, you faced the fustuarium. A military punishment so brutal, it terrifies historians today. You would be stripped naked and beaten to death with heavy wooden clubs by the very comrades you fought alongside. Compared to that, facing the sponge was your only choice if you survived the diseases of the latrine and the terror of the night watch. Your reward was the sunrise. And with the sun came the march. The Roman war machine demanded 20 miles a day, carrying 80 pounds of gear. And they did it all wearing the caligae, the iconic heavy leather sandals studded with iron hobnails. While brilliant for gripping the bloody battlefield, these sandals hid a disgusting, rotting secret. Constant marching through knee-deep mud and freezing rivers created a perfect storm for destruction. Friction from the wet, stiff leather tore the skin right off their heels. Massive blisters popped inside their sandals, mixing sweat, mud, and blood into a festering paste. Flesh-eating infections were a constant threat. But the legion did not stop for blisters. If you couldn't walk, you were left behind to die in hostile territory. So soldiers wrapped their bleeding feet in dirty linen rags, gritted their teeth, and kept marching to endure this extreme physical torture. The legion required fuel. But Roman military rations were a nightmare of their own. The core of their diet was bucellatum, a primitive hardtack biscuit. It was baked twice to completely remove moisture and prevent rot, making it literally as hard as a brick. Worse, the cheap stone mills used to grind a flour constantly chipped. Heavy amounts of sharp sand and gravel would mix directly into the dough. When baked, these biscuits became a hidden trap. With a single, forceful bite, a grown man could easily shatter a tooth in the ancient world. Without modern dentistry, a cracked, infected tooth was an agonizing, lingering death sentence. Severe dental infections ran rampant through the camps, leaving tough warriors screaming in agony. To wash down this miserable food, they drank pasca, a vile mixture of stagnant water and sour vinegar, the same vinegar used in the latrines. If you somehow survived the diseases of the latrine, the bone-crushing marches and the teeth-shattering food, your reward was the battlefield. But the true horror of Roman warfare often began after the battle was over. Welcome to the Valetudinarium, the Roman military hospital. Today, a hospital is a place of healing. In the ancient world, it was a slaughterhouse. If you took a sword to the arm or an arrow to the leg, there was no sterile environment. And worst of all, there was absolutely no anesthesia. Roman military surgeons, known as the Medici, were brilliant anatomists. But their tools looked like instruments of pure torture. Heavy bronze bone saws, sharp flesh hooks, and curved scalpels lay on wooden tables, covered in the dried blood of a dozen men before you. To extract a deeply embedded barbed arrow, the surgeon didn't gently pull it out. He used a terrifying tool called the spoon of Diocles to blindly scrape against your bones and rip the flesh whiter. How did a soldier survive the procedure? 4 of his largest comrades would violently pin him down to a blood-soaked wooden table that the thick, filthy leather strap was shoved into his mouth so he wouldn't bite off his own tongue from the blinding pain. Then, the cutting began. You felt every slice of the scalpel, every grind of the bone saw. Many massive, battle-hardened warriors simply died from the sheer shock of the agonizing pain before the surgery was even finished. If the surgeon successfully amputated shattered limb, he had to stop the catastrophic bleeding instantly. But there were no delicate stitches. Instead, he pulled a heavy iron rod straight from a roaring campfire, the tip glowing a blinding, fiery orange. Without hesitation, he would press the violently burning metal directly into the open wound to sear the flesh shut. The deafening sizzle of boiling blood and the suffocating smell of burning human skin was the ultimate price of Roman survival. If a Roman legionary miraculously survived the disease-ridden latrines, the grueling marches, and the butchery of the surgeon's tent, he was finally allowed to return home. He was given a small plot of land, a few silver coins, and the title of a hero. But the man who returned was rarely the same man who left. Long before modern medicine understood post-traumatic stress disorder, ancient Roman veterans suffered in complete silence. They carried the invisible ghosts of the battlefield back to civilian life. 1808, the grand marble cities of Rome felt alien and terrifying. While the aristocrats celebrated glorious victories, the veterans would wake up screaming in cold sweat. Their hands would violently tremble while holding a simple cup of wine. To them, the smell of vinegar wasn't a seasoning for food. It was the smell of the infectious sponge. The sound of a wooden cart grinding on stone wasn't commerce. It was the bone saw. Their bodies had left the war, but their minds were trapped in the mud forever. When you look at the majestic Colosseum, the pristine aqueducts, and the golden statues of emperors, remember what they were built upon. The glory of Rome was not built on brilliant philosophy or divine favor. It was cemented with the blood, the sweat, and the shattered teeth of these disposable men. The greatest military machine in human history was ultimately a meat grinder, that consumed its own people to build a paradise they could never truly enjoy. So, the next time you see a movie glorifying the shining silver armor of a Roman legionary, remember the dark, suffocating reality beneath it. Remember the sponge on a stick. Remember the searing iron. Would you have survived a single week in the Roman Legion? Let me know in the comments below. And if you think the life of a soldier was hell, wait until you uncover the horrifying, twisted reality of the Roman gladiators. Subscribe and step into the darkness with us next time.